Eaters of Light is not the worst episode ever, but given how dull the past 4 episodes have been compared to the start of the series, it really feels like treading through mud at this point just to get to the finale. I have to say though, more and more people are speaking up either about how much the show has regressed since 2005 and concerned about where it's headed. Whether the showrunners will pay any attention remains to be seen. Although the reaction to the new Doctor being revealed certainly seems like they still don't quite have their eyes open enough though.
Oh my god!
Me, I don't really care where it's headed at this point. I hope it heads right into another hiatus, quite honestly. Why I bothered getting my hopes up when Capaldi came along, I have no idea, but as more people lose interest in the show, I too must part with this project that I began 3 years ago. That's not to say there won't be any more Who content in the years to come, but it certainly won't be the main part of this channel as we enter the new year. You see, I could go ballistic about this episode, but I'm gonna outline what I liked about it first, just so you guys know that I don't completely dislike Eaters of Light. Doctor Who does have a tendency to make great stories surrounding historical mysteries. Regardless of the quality of the story itself, basing an episode of Who on mysteries that humans will never resolve whilst providing an imaginative answer for us is always what keeps me watching. Take 2 previous revival episodes for example, The Unicorn and the Wasp and The Shakespeare Code, also coincidentally directed by Charles Palmer. Shakespeare wrote a play that nobody read. What was in it? We find out. Agatha Christie goes missing for a few days. Where did she go? We find out. This episode, however, focuses on the 9th Legion of the Imperial Roman Army, notorious for going up towards Scotland and never coming back out again. What happened to them? We find out. When the Doctor finds the first body, he notes that this affliction is due to a lack of exposure to the sun. The bone-crushing thing makes scientific sense also, albeit with a bit of jiggery-pokery in the mix. Ordinarily, this results in a vitamin D deficiency, and what does vitamin D do? It regenerates calcium. Whether it makes any scientific sense how a creature can consume and absorb light is questionable, but this is fiction after all, so I'm going to just slide that criticism under the desk. I also liked the focus on age in this episode. The majority of the side characters are young adolescents, and their emotional and rash decision-making leads them to appear weak. They are all taught a lesson in maturity and cooperation, as their superiors, the Doctor, Bill and Nardole, show them how to focus on fighting a common enemy instead of just descending into tribal chaos. There was also a bit where Bill falls down another hole, and thankfully this time it's not a hole that could break bones or exists for absolutely no reason. Now as for the rest of it, well, let's all have a think back to 1989 when the original show was brought to an end. The final episode of that series was called Survival and was written by Rona Munro, who also penned this episode.
Richard, cats, get out of my garden!
How fitting it is that as Moffat's era comes to a close, he chooses the same writer who created the final nail in the coffin of the original series. Funnily enough, this is one of those rare classic Who serials that I've actually seen, and, well, let's just say I wish they picked somebody else. Survival is so underwhelming when you consider that it was the final episode of a series that was on air for 26 years straight. I can already hear the sounds of Whovians wanting to defend Survival, and to be fair, they probably know more about why the show was in such a state at the time compared to me, but think about it. You have a whole catalogue of people that have written some cracking stories for the show in the past 12 years, and instead they chose a woman who hasn't written for the show in 28. That's more time than I've been alive. So anyway, the episode opens with a completely useless opening scene that if I were a channel flicker and I saw that as the opening for the episode, I would just flick over to something else. A young girl's imagination starts going a bit haywire as she insanely starts to hear the song of the folk that defended the world many centuries ago. When we get past the title sequence, we are immediately made aware of how this episode is going to be the budget saver episode part 2. Just by looking at where we are. There's not a single aspect of this episode except for the portal that is interesting to look at. I think out of all the episodes though, Nardole is the most annoying in this one. Why is he even around anymore? It was nice him being just a side character earlier on in the series where we could enjoy an episode or two without him. Admittedly, they weren't the best, but at least we could explore the main pair's relationship. I still know so little about Bill, aside from being reminded that she's a lesbian every other week, that had she been developed more in the earlier stages of the series, I wouldn't mind Nardole being included. But he is just there for, in inverted commas, comedy. In the previous episode, he wasn't in it much, thank God, but still didn't exactly bring anything of note to the series. He continues to do so in this episode, persisting in getting the Doc to protect the vault instead of going off on adventures. You managed fine on your own when the Doctor was dealing with emojis, ice monsters, and helping Bill move house. Why don't you just do it yourself? Then he has that really stupid gag with the popcorn. If the popcorn popped to get them all praying to them like C-3PO in Return of the Jedi, that might have been funny, but because the popcorn is just used to get the Doctor and Nardole away from these people, it feels like such a throwaway. Not to mention that it doesn't do a very good job at stopping the clan from chasing after them. After the Doctor has his 2-day encounter with the portal, Nardole is seen with face paint, telling the barbarians a tale of little to no value. Look how funny Matt Lucas is in different outfits. It's almost like he's done it before. The humour is so non-existent that it makes the whole thing feel awkward, and I don't mean awkward funny like The Office. It's just awkward to sit and attempt to absorb it. In fairness, there is one thing Nardole does in this episode that I did genuinely find funny. When the locals start playing their music to lure the beast, Nardole's comment about it being worse than jazz did make me laugh. Kind of reminded me of something Noel Fielding would say in The Mighty Boosh. Speaking of the humour, I was expecting the episode to make some form of joke about the Doctor's accent. They make plenty of jabs at how dull and boring Scotland and the Scots are, but considering this is the first Doctor with a Scottish accent, you would think it would be utilised for some purpose in this episode. Having said that, I am aware that Scotland wasn't always Scotland either, and that the accents and dialects will undoubtedly have changed from what we know of them in the 21st century. It's a loss either way in my opinion though, seeing as this is Capaldi's last series, and this episode would have been the perfect opportunity to make something out of his accent. The 2-day gap thing I mentioned was really unnecessary as well. It seems that it's only in place to get the face paint on Nardole and, not a lot else, really. In fact, it feels like no time has passed at all. During Bill's conversation with the boys underground, she mentions the Doctor and her sexuality for the first time to them. The leader of the group then starts to come on to Bill in possibly the creepiest way imaginable. More repulsive than that, however, is that we then have another recycled speech where Bill basically says to a random bloke, "I'm a lesbian, so keep your dick in your pants, I'm not interested." Then the Legion boy says that they're best friends because he saved her life. This whole scene is so dull and cringy. I wish they'd talk about the battle or the empires or the monster or something other than sexuality that might actually relate to the story in some way. I thought it was bad enough that they killed off the first Roman Bill finds in the first 10 minutes, only to be replaced by a bunch of completely forgettable soldiers. Because these characters' sexual preferences have no bearing on the story whatsoever, why did they bother putting them in there? The monster in this episode was certainly underwhelming and was revealed far too early. The build up to awakening the monster in the previous episode was really effective, whereas it's not even 10 minutes into the episode where we see what the whole thing looks like. It's a really weird design as well, making it look like a crocodile with tentacles. Sometimes all you can see is the tentacles. Remember, this is part 2 to the budget saver episode, everyone. The other creature in this episode was the crow. It was slightly interesting how they speak the names of humans that have sacrificed themselves for the continued existence of humanity, such as Car and the Doctor. Get it? Because car is the noise that crows make. When I spoke about historic mysteries being solved on the show, establishing why crows make that particular noise is not exactly what I had in mind. When they try and lure the monster back into the portal as well though, I found this quite hilarious. Nadi talks to the crow, but it just says the word monster rather unnecessarily, considering that you could probably have seen the monster coming from a mile away. Now, as we come to the close of the story, we have to talk about Missy. Despite being badgered to an irritating degree to guard the vault, it's revealed that she's now helping the Doctor with TARDIS maintenance. We still don't know why the TARDIS buggered off in the previous episode, but this could have been great if this plot element actually had some payoff. Say, for instance, if she managed to fix the chameleon circuit. That in itself is a story waiting to be told. Don't you guys think it would have been a better idea to have Missy as the third companion, shown in the TARDIS from time to time, and later revealing that when she's not in the TARDIS, she's imprisoned inside the vault, a secret of the Doctor's that Bill would only find out when the time is right, not just before the second half of the series. But instead, they play on the usual theme of is the Master good or bad, as we've established that the Doctor is getting too cozy with his arch nemesis again. This has been done too death. We know the Master's bad. In fact, we already know that there is at least one Master in the final episodes, and as a result of imprisoning her, of course she's going to do something bad given the opportunity. Even with the knowledge of how the finale plays out, anyone with a brain cell can figure out what's going to happen. Predictability is certainly the issue at play here, but we'll talk more about that in the next and final review of Series 10.
This not at all shit episode marks the return of Survivor writer Rona Monroe, thus making her the first writer to have written for both the new series and the classic. During the episode Smile previously in the series, definitely a good character Bill asked to go to Aberdeen. Online speculation draws an ancestral connection between the Trust Us Please Caster character Car and the former companion Amy Pond. Not just a comic relief, Nardole recalls a different answer to the mystery of the Mary Celeste than previously shown in the classic episode The Chase. Carr also quotes the famous line from the Roman book Tacitus, in which a speech is given by the potentially fictitious Celtic general Calgacus. Oh, by the way, check out my super busy, always active, basically daily uploaded channel. Alright, peace. Dog.
So, did it suck? You guys knew the answer to this question before you even clicked on this video. Admittedly, with this expectation, I'm reminded to be as fair as I can in what I liked and didn't like. I liked the premise, the science, and some of the special effects. However, watching this series still feels like swimming through slowly solidifying cement. The boring and budget-saving location, Nardole and his insistence on protecting the vault, Bill's lack of character, and Missy's seemingly pointless section at the end all lead to a severely disappointing episode. Well, I say disappointing. After 3 dull episodes in a row, one begins to expect these things after a while. I give Eaters of Light a 3 out of 10. There was also a bit where Bill falls down another hole. A hole? I think she fell down a hole. How fitting it is that as you have a whole catalogue of people that have written some crack. Love a bit of phlegm in the morning. Oh my god.